ladies and gentlemen. It is with pleasure that we welcome with us this morning Dr. Joe Borg. I've got no problem with it. I always remember the name. Dr. Joe Borg, let's start from not the very beginning, but after being elected in Parliament, he became Minister for Foreign Affairs in 2009, I believe, no, up to 2014.
1999 to 2004.
Okay, 1999 to 2004. In 2003, he was, together with Prime Minister Dr. Joe, he signed the accession treaty in Athens, practically at the Parthenon. We were speaking about that occasion in a very nice atmosphere after Malta had voted yes in the referendum for accession into the European Union. And in 2004, 1st May 2004, that's 21 practically exactly years from now, 21 years from now, Malta acceded to the European Union as a full member. From that time, Joe was also, I think, one of the first commissioners when Malta joined. He had the Maritime Affairs and Fisheries as Commissioner of the European Union. From that time, Malta has developed its membership in the European Union. We'll be looking at the past, the present, and also the future. In your good hands. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for inviting me to deliver a talk on the subject, Malta and the European Union, a glance at the past and then look towards the future. I need to see how I can juggle with the mic and this as well, and I have some notes. So, without the mic, you like the hair down there? Without the mic, do some. Okay. So, by way of introduction, as my namesake said, today is just 2 days after the 21st anniversary of Malta's accession to the European Union. So it's quite appropriate, I think, that, well, we look at the past and the very first at how Malta, at the history, and at how Malta joined the European Union as we know it today. The very first step towards the European Union was literally very soon after Malta's independence in 1964. The Bolshevik government at the time wanted to establish, Malta was newly independent, and he wanted to establish some form of relationship with this group of European states. There were 6 at the time: France, Germany, Italy, and the Benelux countries, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. He wanted to establish some form of relationship with this group of countries because he felt that both economically and politically it would make sense for Malta to be anchored within a group of European countries. And this was also in itself, this concept was in itself also relatively new. We had 3 communities at the time: the coal and steel community, which was the first one and which was entered into in order to, so to say, to cooperate on the raw material which could give rise to wars, coal and steel. So they wanted to have cooperation there rather than fighting for so to say, grabbing this raw material, because the scope was to avoid a 3rd World War. There was the atomic energy community, also very nice, but then there was the European Economic Community. And Bolshevik at the time felt that we should try to establish an association relationship with the European Economic Community If I'm not mistaken, at the time, the only country that had sought and obtained an association relationship was Turkey. Turkey was one of the first to, if not the first, to get this association relationship. Obviously, it took some time in negotiations, and Malta entered into this association agreement with the European Economic Community in 1970. The idea behind the association relationship was that of a customs union, that there would be a customs union between Malta and the European Economic Community, and therefore it meant the dismantling of tariff barriers, dismantling of physical barriers, and all the lot. The problem was that just a few months after the association agreement was signed, Borg lost the elections, and instead we had a Labour government. And the Labour government, Mintoff in particular, was not particularly keen on, it seems, on having close relations with the European Economic Community as such. Possibly not for political reasons, more for what he considered to be the better way forward for Malta. His concept was to incentivize, to promote local industry, and in order to promote local industry, he felt that the best way would be to give them as much protection as possible. And protection and the customs union, where the whole concept of protection within the union is anathema, was a no-go. And so he did not show any interest in the development of this customs union. The end result was that for the whole term of the Mintoff and then Mr. Bonnici government, for the whole term, this association agreement remained a dead letter, remained in abeyance. Virtually no, sometimes just lip service to it. The Nationalist Party, on its part, also maybe because of this, decided before the elections of, my dates are not always very good, before the elections of 1981, in its electoral manifesto, spelled out that were it to be in government, it would seek membership of the European Economic, of the three communities, of the three treaties, because for membership, and by that time we had the UK, Ireland, Denmark joining, and Greece, I think, had just joined, and Spain and Portugal were on the doorstep of membership. So it had increased quite considerably. And the Nationalist Party felt that it made sense for Malta to become a member of these three communities. It didn't win the elections of 1981. It gained a majority of votes, so amongst the electorate it seems that this idea was quite popular, but it didn't get a majority of seats, so it remained in opposition. We now go to the 1987 elections, where this time around the Nationalist Party won the elections and obtained the majority of seats in Parliament, and therefore it ended up in government. And true to the commitment it had made, it started seeking what needs to be done for Malta to apply well, I didn't go through those, but you follow that, I suppose. For Malta to apply for membership. And the first decision that was taken was that a report should be drawn up regarding Malta's membership of the European Community. At the time, it was, the jargon was that was started being called as the European Community, first the European Communities, and then the European Community, and then with the advent, later on with the European Union. So for membership of the European Community, the European Community amended 3 treaties at the time. This report was finalized in late 1989, early 1990. I was the head of the directorate at the time, of the EC directorate at the time, and we presented it to the cabinet, for the cabinet to take the decision as to whether Malta should submit the application for membership or not. It was quite a chunky report, I think around about 450 pages of it, so it was quite an in-depth analysis of what membership entails, the pros and cons of membership vis-à-vis Malta. And at the time, what we call the acquis, the legislation, the whole laws and regulations of the European Union were not as intense as they are today. But even at that time, it meant that we had to go through quite an exercise to determine what would suit Malta best. The conclusion of the report that it made sense for Malta to join the European community, both on the economic front and on the social front, and also on the political front. It would give stability to this island in the middle of the Mediterranean, which Mediterranean is never really as calm as it sometimes is portrayed to be. So, on the basis of the decision taken by Cabinet, the application for membership was submitted on the 16th of July 1990. From then on, we started a process of adaptation, because it was made abundantly clear that to join the European community, it is not just a question of, like for example, joining other conventions, applying, and if there is a political decision to join, then you are in. The European Union had done that, or almost, with regard to Greece. Greece joined, and it was not really well prepared, and it was chaotic for Greece and for the other member states. So they said, never again. So they told us, in not so many words, you need to prepare yourselves. You need to prepare your structures, your administration, your economy, so that you would be able to face up to the challenges that membership would present to you. And therefore we started the whole process of changes in our system, in our administration, our administrative setup, in the way we do things, in our legislation. We started the process of dismantling. So what we didn't do with the association agreement, we had to do in a much shorter time, because by the way, the association agreement had envisaged a customs union. This was way back in 1970, which would take 10 years to achieve. When we applied for membership, we wanted to attain the same result, that is the dismantling of all tariff barriers, of all physical barriers, of all health barriers, what have you, within a period of maybe a couple of years, or maybe a little more. So it was tough going. We had to reform our taxation structure. We had the taxation structure based on import duties and direct taxes, to one which is based on indirect tax, and therefore the introduction of value-added tax. Value-added tax came about in the early 1994, 1995, somewhere there. And we reformed a number of laws, the standardization laws, company law, the Companies Act, which harmonized all the laws of all the directives of the European Union, which adopted all the directives of the European Union in one law, which was the Companies Act of 1995. What happened? We came to the elections of 1996, and the Labour Party carried out a very efficient and effective campaign, which ran as follows. We are being made to make all these sacrifices, and sure, the introduction of value-added tax, I don't think that many people were too happy about it. The dismantling of all these tariff barriers, etc., and therefore local businesses who had their own small industry, etc., were not particularly happy of it. And there was no light at the end of the tunnel, because certain countries with whom the European Union had very close relations already on the economic and political front, like Austria, like Finland and Sweden, joined in '92. And we were still too early, it was still too early for us to join. And then from '92 to '96, nothing really happened on the European Union front. And therefore the Labour Party was saying, all pain and no gain. Maybe you remember. This is all pain and no gain. We are being taken for a ride by this European community. And we lost the elections. 2 years down the line, it so happened that there were early elections. We don't need to go into the details of them, but the Southern government lost a vote of confidence in Parliament just after 2 years. And one can say it's a stroke of luck for those who believe in the European Union, or of good fortune. The Nationalist Party had to face elections again. And this time around, even though only after 2 years, the Nationalist Party won the elections. How did it win the elections? Not normally, absolutely not, just after 2 years. And I would say there were 3 reasons for this. And the 3 of them were linked with the European Union. One was that immediately after '96, a year after, negotiations started with 5, there were at the time 10 applicant countries after Malta. Cyprus immediately applied, and then 8 other Central and Eastern European countries. So, immediately after '96, the European Commission began negotiations with 5 of those 10, amongst which were Cyprus. And Cyprus and Malta always sort of try to, in a friendly way, compete with one another. And I think psychologically, the fact that negotiations had started with Cyprus, and we were left out because our application had been frozen after the Labour Party won the election of '96, it froze the application. So nothing would happen anymore. So the negotiations couldn't begin with Malta, even if they wanted to, even if the Commission wanted to. I think that had an impact on the thinking of the Maltese. We are going to be left out. And therefore it was not true that we are being taken for a ride, because negotiations have started now, just almost a few months after. So that was one reason. The other reason is that I don't think that the Southern government made a very good job out of delivering on the promise that it had made, that it wanted to remove VAT. Because although on paper it removed VAT, it introduced another tax system. It didn't go back to the tariff barriers, it didn't want to go there, introduce tariffs, etc. It introduced another system of indirect taxation, which was a hodgepodge. In my own opinion, the set with cash registers, and I don't know. So I don't think that went down very well as well. And the third reason was that when the Nationalist Party was, during the term that it was in opposition, it said to itself, we may have a problem with convincing the electorate to vote for membership, no questions asked. And therefore we need to reassure the Maltese that they will have a say in it. And therefore, from the opposition benches, we came up with the proposal that when we end up in government, we will reactivate the application for membership, we will negotiate as effectively as possible, and then upon the successful conclusion of negotiations, we will hold a referendum. So that it will be the Maltese and the Gozans who will decide on membership, not just the Maltese Parliament itself, on its own, but it will be me and you who will decide whether we want to go for membership. It was a big risk, it was a really big risk, but I think it was worthwhile. And I'll come to this soon. I hope I won't take too much of this. So, after the elections of '98, we won the elections. We immediately applied to reactivate the application. At first, the commissioner in charge wasn't too pleased. He said, this is not a question of switch off, switch off. Whenever you want, you switch on, and then whenever you want, you switch off, and then if you decide that you don't like to switch on again. But that commissioner who was Dutch was at the end of his term. The Dutch are very blunt, so you know exactly where you are. My experience as a commissioner. I used to enjoy working with the Dutch. Obviously, my area of fisheries and maritime affairs, because you know exactly where you stand with them, and that's good. But rather than, instead of the Dutch Commissioner for Enlargement, we had a German Commissioner for Enlargement. And the Germans are probably the most favorably disposed towards enlargement. And therefore, he immediately said, yes, no problem, we'll reactivate the application. And the application was reactivated. They wanted to get things going with the negotiations process, and therefore we had to rush, so to say, in order to go through what was called, and still called today, the negotiation process, the screening of our legislation, of our acquis, so to say, with that of the EU, in order to see where we are okay, where we are not, and what we need to do to be okay. We decided to set up a whole structure in order to deal with negotiations effectively. And at the very top we had the Cabinet Committee on the EU, chaired by the Prime Minister, obviously. I was, so to say, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Finance, and the Cabinet Committee's role was to take the political decision, and it would be the Cabinet itself as well. But first decision at the political level would be the Cabinet Committee on each individual aspect of Malta's membership, on each individual chapter, so to say, that we were considering. Then we had the negotiating team, which was led very ably by Richard Takia. He was the person who was leading the negotiating team, and these were the people who were preparing. Most of them are people coming from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, from my ministry at the time, or from the different ministries, in agriculture, for example, finance, etc. And they would prepare the paperwork needed on what we need to try to negotiate. Where we are okay, we take it off. Where we are not, what do we need to ask for? Then there was the Malta EU Steering and Action Committee, the USAC. The scope of the one, which still, as far as I know, exists maybe in a different format today, but at the time it was very active. I used to chair USAC, and we used to meet almost daily with all the stakeholders, with the representative organizations, trade unions, political parties, everyone, NGOs. And everyone joined, other than the Labour Party, because the Labour Party had a position which was against membership. But even, for example, the General Workers' Union was represented, and they took an active part. Even hunters, associations, etc. So it was fully comprehensive, and I think that was part of the way whereby we got all the different stakeholders on board, or at least they felt that they are being involved in the decision-taking mechanism, because the scope of the MUSAC was to present to them what was being prepared by our negotiation strategy. And they would say, okay, we like this, no, we should ask for more on this, or you did not consider this you should include it. So it was also a means whereby we gave a more complete picture of our needs, let's call it that. And then we had the MIC, the Malta Information Centre, which was run by Simon Dusuti. And the Malta Information Centre, the scope of it was to explain to us all, to the Maltese and Gozans, what we are negotiating, what membership entails, and also to hold public dialogues. There were quite a lot of those going on, dialogues with people, discussions with people on the pros and cons of membership and all that. We wanted this because we knew that if we don't win the referendum, it would be, so to say, bye-bye to the European Union. It would definitely have been bye-bye for me as a Minister of Foreign Affairs, because I had the political responsibility for it, and probably for the whole of government. So that's why I said before, it was a very big risk. And therefore we wanted to do our utmost to win the referendum. And knowing that the Labour Party was very well equipped also with Alfred Sant as leader of the opposition, on the negative dimension of membership, we needed to counter that by presenting the complete picture of what membership means for Malta. Negotiations began in 2000, nearly 2000. They took almost 3 years. They came to an end in 2000 and, let's see if they came to an end in 2002, end of 2002. So from beginning of 2000 to end of 2002, in December of 2002. And I think we managed to negotiate a very good package. We negotiated in the region of about 60 plus transitional arrangements. Transitional arrangements would be where we say, okay, we are not yet ready, we are not yet in line, and we need, let's say, 3 years more from the date of membership to become in line. And this was in a number of areas connected with trade, connected with agriculture, where we felt that we needed more time to become completely in line with the rules of the European Union. And we managed to attain about 60 of these transitional arrangements. I think we had the highest by way of number of transitional arrangements, not take one for person by user. We also managed to obtain special arrangements, which was not normal, in the fisheries sector, the fisheries management zone around Malta, especially because of Lampuki fishing, which was therefore basically protecting the fishers that we had by the grant of licenses, and that's it. For example, 100 licenses and no more. And basically we had maybe 95, 96 fishers that fish for Lampuki, and there were maybe only 3 or 4 left up for grabs. So in that way we protected the existing fisheries population. That was a special. And the reason behind it is that if you overfish these Lampuki, it would be a disaster, so we need to have a fisheries management. And have to give the, so to say, the first right of refusal to those who are already in the playing field, so to say. We negotiated a special arrangement also with regard to real estate. Property in Malta, as we all know, is a scarce commodity. It's very expensive, and if you open up indiscriminately to all European citizens to buy property in Malta without control, it was certain that the properties would go even more sky high than they are. And therefore we negotiated a special arrangement with regard to real estate. And we also negotiated a special arrangement with regard to movement of workers. The Labour Party at the time had carried out a campaign that immediately we joined, we would end up flooded by Sicilian workers, and therefore we needed to introduce provisions in order to see to it that if that were to happen, we would be able to close the gates, and this was accepted for a period of, if I remember well, for a period of about 10 to 12 years. It didn't happen within those 10 to 12, I mean, yes, we had Sicilians coming, but not flooding the Maltese islands at that time. And therefore, then that thing came to an end. The referendum, we went for the referendum, which was held on the 8th of March 2003, armed with, I think, a very effective information campaign, a very direct involvement of all the different stakeholders, and a very good negotiated package. And I think all three helped us to achieve the, by way of how elections go in Malta, a historic result of 54% voting of all the valid votes cast, 54% voting in favour of membership. And that was, I think, a very big success by, even though it was one of the lowest percentages you look at other member states, but here we're split down the middle, as we probably all remember. One of the two major parties saying it wants membership, the other saying it does not want. So you need to make, you are going to lose a few, our logic was, we are going to lose a few, and maybe not a few, from our own camp. And therefore have to make inroads, and significant inroads, into the other camp, into the Labour camp. And we managed to do it, because otherwise we wouldn't have attained that result. After the referendum, Kadami decided to call a general election. This was not, to be honest, from the European front, they were not too happy that we won the referendum, sort of double jeopardy, and after the referendum we're going to hold an election. What if you lose the election, they told us. And we were stalling, because all the others were ready. So we were stalling the signing ceremony, because we need to hold a general election. And we had a general election, in fact, just weeks after, on the 12th of April, and then on the 16th of April, 4 days after the election, immediately the result was out, we went off to Athens to sign the accession treaty. So that is the story, by way of how we became a member. Now, let's see. Give me a moment, please. The question to ask is, has membership been a success story? Well, it is safe to say that today there is quasi full acceptance of membership in Malta and Gozo. The polls that are held regularly by Eurostat and also here in Malta almost invariably show a figure of 80% plus saying that membership is a good thing for Malta. So if you compare that with the 54%, it's a huge difference. We were happy with the 54%. Now today we're saying that there are, it's amongst the highest in the European Union when you take individual member countries, that are favourable vis-à-vis the European Union. Why so? First, because, yes, I think we can say that membership has been a success story for us, And second, to be ċaqajna mal-art, with our feet on the ground, the Labour Party no longer opposed membership. And therefore you had a whole chunk of people who voted against membership because the Labour Party said that membership is not good for us. Now that the Labour Party decided to go along with membership and to make the best out of it, those people no longer retained any reservation. And therefore they were able to assess whether membership is a good thing or not on the basis of what the party told them, but on the basis of what they themselves felt. Yeah, very on my beach. And so I would say that yes, there was quasi-full acceptance, there is quasi-full acceptance, and we have taken huge strides in various economic sectors. It has positioned itself, Malta has positioned itself as an attractive location for companies to do business in Europe. So we have had in a number of sectors, especially connected with financial services sector, etc., gaming and all that. So to do business in the general sense, Malta is seen as a reliable partner. It's not a maverick state, and therefore, yes, we can invest in Malta because it gives us an opening to this far wider market, whatever field of business it is, which is the European Union. Malta has benefited from a significant mobilization of funds that were made available. I think if you look around you, you see this for yourselves. This project has been partly financed by the European Union, whether it is an infrastructure project, whether it's a project connected with culture, with education, with the environment. So it has benefited from a huge mobilization of funding opportunities. It has meant significant benefits for the Maltese and our youth in particular, especially in the fields of education, with the education programs that there are, Socrates, Erasmus in particular, and work opportunities. Today, I mean, young children who decide that they want to seek work opportunities abroad can easily do it without any questions being asked by going to any member state of the European Union. They don't need any work permit or anything else of the sort. So that has opened up enormous horizons for youth. And I've experienced rapid modernization in liberal social policies. Certain liberal social policies, which we did not have before, have maybe become awareness about them, and the liking to them has developed also as a result of membership of the European Union and in the digital infrastructure area. We became a member of Schengen on the 21st December 2007, and that has meant that we are part of the Schengen area, and therefore we can move freely from one Schengen country to another without any controls and limitations whatsoever. And that is for whoever wants to travel, whether a holiday, business or work, is also in itself a big plus. We adopted the euro instead of the Maltese lira as our currency just a few days after that, on the 1st of January 2010 date. And again, it is very convenient, with no negative connotation with regard to Maltese lira, but the fact is that it is very convenient to have the same currency that exists in quite a number of other European Union member states. I remember a time where you used to have to exchange currency, lose on exchange, a little, pay commissions, etc. Whereas today you just, if you want to decide to go, you just go with the money you have in your pocket, so to say. And one last point which I would like to mention, which is connected to the membership has been a success story is that the GDP has grown significantly, as did employment. Today, Malta places 9th in the EU, with an index of 107, this is the purchasing power parities, the EU average being 100, so the EU average is 100, and the member states will go either below the 100 or above the 100. Today, we are 107, above the average. In 2013, it had already grown to 91 from 72 in 2004. So it was 72 of 100 in 2004. 10 years after, it was 91, and 10 years after that, or 11 almost, it is 107. And the purchasing power per capita was 14,000 plus euro in 2004, and we ranked 17th. In 2013, it was 40,900. In 2023, it was 40,900, almost 41,000 from 14,000. The EU average was 38,000, and we ranked the 9th. So this is definitely, from an economic viewpoint, a success story. From 17th, we end up today the 9th. Sometimes it's quoted as 9th, sometimes it's quoted as 10th, because we are, so to say, very close to Finland. Sometimes Finland overtakes us a little, then we overtake Finland again. We are very close in those figures. Okay, I think I've said more than enough with regard to membership. Għana fl-offsinar kun nispiċċaw? Mela, okay, I'll try to go fast. There are 4 questions. There are, wow, there are 4 questions with regard to the European Union, the future of the European Union. The first is the future of the European Union at risk? Is there a risk of its breaking up? And the reply is yes, there is a risk. If factors like populist politics, if factors like the far right, if factors like Brexit are repeated, so if you have an increase of far right parties that tend to be more nationalistic in their approach, that they don't look at the outside but look more inwards, yes, there is that risk. And we are experiencing it in various countries in the European Union. If Brexit was not a one-off, but it is repeated by others, then yes, you can have a splintering of the European Union. The second question, is there any future need for the EU? In other words, has the EU done its job? And enough time has passed since World War II that we now believe we can make it on our own? Or this would be foolhardy? In my view, it would be foolhardy, but that is my view. There are many who believe that we no longer need the European Union. At most, it has done its job, but we don't need it anymore. Can the European Union evolve any further, or has it gone as far as that to go? So, okay, if it is not dismembered, if we still need it to be there, but enough, it has reached where it had to reach, and let's stay there. The problem with this is that if you stay there, you start moving back. That's life. So unless you continue striving to move forward, you start automatically moving. Because others who are in a way in competition with you will always want to beat you. And you can see the Chinas of this world, for example, the Indias of this world. If you are not a step ahead, you will end up being a step back. So should there be further deepening, and what about further widening? And this is my other topic. No. with regard to the further widening, we said whether there is any interest in the EU and Brexit and all that. Is there any interest in joining the EU by others, or everyone has gone cold? And the reality of the situation is that there are 9 applicant states. There are 9 countries knocking at the doors of the European Union. There are not, most of them are not big countries, but there aren't any big countries left other than Ukraine and Turkey. With Turkey there are 10. Now why am I saying 9? Because 9 are active. Turkey's application was, in a way, put in abeyance in 2018 because of certain problems with decisions and the way Erdogan was doing things. So the European Union said we will not continue with negotiations for the time being. With Georgia, there was a similar problem last year with certain decisions that were taken, and then with suspicions by the OSCE that the elections were not conducted properly, etc. So the European Union is again. But with the rest, negotiations are moving forward, and the European Commission has said that during this legislative term, during these 5 years, the negotiations were on the back burner before. During these 5 years, they are going to be put on the front burner because the European Union needs to enlarge. It gives it, so to say, a boost. Enlargement gives it, because it becomes larger. And there we're speaking of 67 million if you leave Turkey out, and another 86 million if you include Turkey. So we're speaking of taking together quite a large number of other European citizens. And this means that the European economy can only become stronger. I would like to dedicate what's left of my time on the question of deepening or becoming stronger. So deepening and widening, or becoming stronger and enlarging. Enlarging, we've seen, there is demand for it. What about deepening? And these go together. There are European Council priorities, which are mentioned there. I'm not going to go into them because they are all included in the priorities of the European Commission. The European Council priorities were published in, I think, May, June of last year, just before the European Parliament elections, and the European Commission priorities were published just a month after. They are all comprised within the European Council priorities, are all comprised within the European Commission priorities. The European Commission priorities are deeper, are more detailed, and cover other areas as well. This is normal. The European Council is made up of the member states. And the member states tend to look after their own, each one looks after its own interests. So their vision as to the future of Europe tends to be limited by that factor. And it won't suit me if we go in this direction, and you have to all this. And therefore, the European Council tends to move on the basis of the least common denominator, or on the base of the slowest mover. Whereas the European Commission has the European interest at heart, and therefore it looks at the totality of the picture, at what suits the European Union best, and therefore its member states, but member states as a totality and not individual member states. And we have competitiveness that the European Union has to, okay, I don't have time, so I can't go into the detail really, but then if you ask questions, I can go into them. The European Union has to become even more competitive than it is, even taking into account modern, like for example artificial intelligence. The European Union wants to be a world leader in AI, in artificial intelligence. European social fairness. Europe has always been, in a way, a model when it comes to social rights, and it wants that its social policy will be based more and more on what is really fair. And therefore, for example, the question of equal wages and equal opportunities between males and females, and all that. Quality of life, and in particular the stress here is on agriculture. We need to protect our agriculture so that it won't be dependent on outside markets as much as possible, and on environment. Again, the European Union has to a large extent been a leader when it comes to environment, and it wants to retain that and even reach up to the goal that it said that we want to be carbon neutral by 2050, 2050. And the steps have to be taken that a global Europe has to be a player, and globally, and a player globally promoting globalization, not promoting inward-looking politics, as the United States has been recently doing. That does not suit the European Union. It looks at it from the opposite perspective, that we are stronger if we are more open to competition and so on. And the EU budget has to be drawn in a way whereby it can satisfy all those objectives. With regard to Malta, I don't think we have any real problems on these. Two cautionary notes. One, to be effective, we need to prepare ourselves whenever any changes come about on these lines. We need to implement properly, because if we don't implement properly, then we can end up wasting a lot of precious time in order to learn, and we need to enforce properly European legislation. We can end up being taken to the European Court, and that's a waste of time and a waste of money. So that is one word of caution. The other is we need to look at what is being proposed from the very start. And if we know that there is something which is being proposed which may affect us negatively, then let us speak out and make our case. The worst thing that could happen is that the European Union would have come up with a position and proceeded without any objections being raised. And then you go at the end of the day and say, hey, but that is not going to work well with me. Too late, sort of. So the more we make our case at an early stage, the better are the chances that we would affect, and we have affected on a number of occasions, the final outcome, what the final outcome will be. Because if we can convince that that is really going to hit you badly, the European Union, the European Commission in particular, will find a way whereby it makes not an exception, but an adaptation of it to suit your needs. But you need to act early. Okay. So that was said. Then there are the four hard nuts to crack. So democracy and our values. The EU obviously insists that all member countries have to practice the democracy as we know it, and there are certain problems with this, for example, with Hungary, to quote a member state. There are applicant countries where this concept leaves a lot to be desired, and therefore they need to bring their house in order before they can be accepted members. Our values refers to the rule of law. Again, that is something where the EU is increasingly being adamant that there has to be the proper adherence to the rule of law, and funding is now being made as a condition. If you do not follow the rule of law principles properly, then we will withhold funding. So there is like sort of the carrot and the thing. And there is also the involvement of the European citizens. Again, for us, I don't think that this is a particular problem. If we really believe, and I think we do believe, that we want our country to adhere to proper democratic principles as we know them, to adhere to the rule of law, then I don't think that we should find any difficulty with implementing measures in that direction which are introduced by the European Union. Defence is a hard nut to crack for us because it is abundantly clear that the European Union is moving in the direction of a defence union. And it will come about, it's no longer a question of that may come about, it will come about, and it will come about sooner rather than later. And therefore we as a country, and it means quite a number of measures. It is not a question of the European Union, let me make this clear, the European Union becoming an aggressor. It never was since the European Union has come about. It has learned its lessons of the past. But it wants to be properly armed against unjust aggression. And we have seen this happening, and the European Union cannot any longer rely on the United States. So far, it was convenient for the European Union to sit back, and the United States does what needs to be done to bring about law and order and all the rest against unjust aggression. The United States doesn't want to do this any longer, and therefore the European Union has to adopt that role in the individual member states first and foremost. But they have to be coordinated to this role. And they can only be coordinated through the European Union. So we're not speaking of a European army, but we're speaking of coordination at the European level of all the different national armies for the European Union to be strong enough to go and face the challenges that can appear. With us, we have the problem. We have the issue of neutrality. Now, we can take one of three positions on this. We can say that neutrality is sacrosanct, and we do not want to have anything to do with the evolution of defence within the European Union, so we'll opt out of that, and this is possible. We can say, but let's see what our neutrality really means in today's world, and see whether we can be part of a European defence union without relinquishing our neutrality. And this is also possible. It will not be as open-ended as those who are not neutral. But we can sit there, and there are two other member states, Austria and Ireland, that have done exactly this. We are still neutral, but we can take part. As long as it is in defense, as long as it doesn't mean that we'll have military bases in our countries, etc. Or we can open to either question, do we need neutrality any longer in today's world or not? And then a decision will be taken at the political level, probably at the national level through referendum, if we decide that we want to go in the direction of abandoning, so to say, our neutrality. On security, it is on similar but not so problematic for us because everyone wants to be secure. And security means preparedness, that we need to be prepared against, for example, natural disasters, against terrorism, against all the possible matters that can arise that can affect our sense of security. And the white paper on preparedness, by the way, the white paper on the European Defence Union had just been issued as well, about a month ago, so they're moving fast. A white paper on preparedness has just been issued as well. As always happens, there are 30 action points. One action point said that the European citizens need to be prepared and have a stock of which can last about 70 hours in case of them. Obviously that was picked up. It was picked up, and this is where sometimes you pick up and you make what we call half-truths. It's true, it's there, but it's there within a whole context, and it's not applicable for, I mean, if there's a war, but if, for example, there is an earthquake, if there is a volcano eruption, if there are floods, where there are many in Europe, so they're not really applicable to us, then it's good that people living or a forest fire, people living around the area should be equipped with a stock of at least 72 hours until aid or assistance can reach them if they're caught in that area. So this is behind it. To make fun out of it, I think, is a little puerilely with saying what So security means safety. It means also protection of borders against terrorism, against drug trafficking, etc. And it means also migration, the question of migration, where the Commission is spelling out that it is a European Union, it is a European problem which has to be solved. Finally, it is spelling it out in so many words, which has to be solved by European means. So there we have made a significant move forward. All those countries that suffer from, so to say, a lot of irregular migration. And finally, reform. And reform and that goes there. Reform goes hand in hand with enlargement. If reform of the institutions, if enlargement does not take place, then we can remain with the institutions as they are. But if enlargement takes place, imagine another 8 member states. You will end up with a commission where each and every commission would have, or most of them, or many of them, would have a sort of ridiculous portfolio. A portfolio without any real worth. The European Parliament would become enormously large. The Council of Ministers, how the votes are taken, it can become also, especially for the smaller states. And not only the smallest states, the smaller states in general can be affected by this. So, with regard to us, with regard to Malta, again, we need to be careful here and prepare ourselves on the position we will take when it comes to reforming decisions on the European Commission. Who has a right to a European Commissioner? How many members of Parliament can we have? How decisions are taken, the distribution of powers between the European Parliament and the Council of Ministers, because the Council of Ministers have our own minister. In the European Parliament we have only 6 out of, I don't know, maybe 800 then. And also on the voting distribution in the Council of Ministers. So I think that is, so now call that date also, I think that, therefore, that is what I had to say. If I can sum up very briefly with this part in short, it is there, but it will take more time to reach it. This is my view. It is far better to have an imperfect union and to always try to make it work better than to have no union at all. This is my own personal belief, because I honestly believe that Malta has gained a lot from membership, Europe has gained a lot from membership, and it would be a big pity if we go back to where we were immediately after the Second World War. Thank you. Questions for those who, yes? Yes, Antonio.
Thank you for reminding us of a happy chapter of our country joining the European Union. We have played your part, and we played your part very well, and of course we understand problems we have to face. And I would like to ask whether you have any recollection of the Gozo not commission, Gozo
region. The regional.
There was a Gozo declaration.
Yes, declaration, yes.
You are aware of that?
Yes. Il-fatt ma semmejtix mis-Ministru. Għaxet għal-wek.
Declaration.
Yeah. Let me see where that is with. So there are 3 declarations, one on abortion,
Yes.
one on neutrality, where in each case we said this is our affair, the European Union cannot impose that we remove neutrality or that we introduce abortion, and one on Gozo, which noted the economic and social specificities and drawbacks of the island. So That is a declaration. We have, I believe we have sometimes referred to it. Our permanent presentation in Brussels has sometimes referred to it where there were issues which could affect Gozo negatively. But obviously, you who live in Gozo have to make, if there's a monitoring of any proposed legislation that could affect Gozo specifically because of its insularity and all that, then if it is not picked up centrally, I mean by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or by our permanent representation, it is important that it is picked up here and transmitted to where it needs to be transmitted. Now you have the ECOSOC, for example, where these problems can be also picked up, etc., and made known. But yes, we have that declaration with regard to Gozo, which can be made use of if the need arises.
Yes, I thought that the declaration notes that if the position in water, the economic position in water, and that in Gozo, there is a great difference, the EU would be in a position to address those problems and let the water government know what should be done to level, to balance. I think it contains also this...
yes, but primarily it is for you to make the case, Gozo to make the case that its economic situation is significantly different from that in Malta. I mean, if the difference is within acceptable limits, then it won't be picked up. But if there is a significant difference, then Gozo has to make the case. And the Maltese, then the Maltese government can pick it up. If it is not picked up, then Gozo can refer it also to the European Commission. And if it is picked up, then in the distribution, for example, of financial assistance, the European Commission can and will factor that in so that more funds will come Gozo's way than Malta's way, because Gozo needs them more. But to be honest, you haven't done it so badly when it comes to financial assistance from the European Union.
That's a question of the way you see things.
Yes.
But still, thank you for the...
Okay.
First of all, thank you for this wonderful overview that you gave of Malta's journey towards the European Union. 4 brief points. First, when the Portugal government signed the association agreement in 1970, it chose the common market, what was then called the common market, as against EFTA. There was a rival organization, European Free Trade Association, so there was a very clear choice at that time. It's true the association agreement was not developed during the Mintov years. However, I believe the Mintov government made full use of it when in the 70s it attracted massive German investment on the island, which benefited from duty-free exports to the common market and also the duty-free importation of the raw materials. Thirdly, now coming to today, the big problem the European Union has got is competitiveness. It's the increase in GDP of the EU27 over the last 10 years has been 2/3 that of America, which on the other hand, that of America is half that of China. So its economic development is lagging, and it is fueling extreme right-wing populism. So I think the Draghi report has got to be acted upon, and has got to be acted upon quickly, and the European Union has got to become more proactive, less bureaucratic, because right now too many rules, there is a regulatory overkill which is stifling initiative. Regarding defense, I think the choice is very clear, and we in Malta, we are lagging behind. The other day we had a very serious violation of our sovereignty, and I think it is an eye-opener for all, and we cannot we cannot continue to rest on this concept of neutrality in this hostile environment.
Yeah, I agree with you completely with regard to Malta and Mintoff making. You're right. Mintoff did it in order to try to get concessions from Germany, and he succeeded. But it was one-way traffic, and you cannot go on it. So that a country like Germany would try you out once, but then if it realizes that it's going to remain one-way traffic and you are not liberalizing at all, but making arrangements with, for example, at the time China's of this world for a chocolate factory like in Khazina Mens. I mean, that sort of protection. The European Union doesn't take. So yes, you're right, but there wasn't this two-way trust that I give you part and you give me something. It was always one-way traffic, always in the interests of Malta. Mhux qed inkun jiġifieri jagħmel Mintoff kien fl-interess ta' Malta. Imma fid-dinja you cannot just take that sort of approach continuously. And with regard to Pompeo, you're completely right. If you, probably you have, if you go through President van der Leyen's speech to the European Parliament when she launched the priorities, she goes into these sort of details. And this sort of criticism that you have made with regard to the European economy, with regard to the Chinese economy exploding and ours remaining, with regard to the Americas, but the Americas, a good chunk of it is on defense aspects. So that is also one of the reasons why the European Union wants to have its own defense industry, so that armaments, etc., which are used for your own defense, will not be bought from the United States, probably at a premium, but built by the European Union itself, and thereby incentivizing its own economy to go stronger and stronger. So that is part of the. If you look at the defense expenditure, I had a slide on it. If you look at the defense expenditure, there it is. The USA is 968. That is in 2024, I think. 968, I don't know, yes. 968. The EU 27 is 340 defense expenditure. All the 27 taken together, and the EU itself. China is 235 already. So it's increased considerably.
Probably it's underestimated of China.
Probably as well. So you can see there that there is a huge disparity on what we spend on defense and what the United States spends on defense. And that goes into the United States economy. And what the United States gives within inverted commas to Ukraine, now we're realizing that they have to pay for it, okay, strengthens the United States economy. What the EU gives and really gives to Ukraine facilitates the US economy because they buy them from there. So this is what you have in actual fact.
And besides, one other thing about defense is that there are lots of different systems which are not standardized. So there's lots of ways.
Yes.
Somebody else, please. Thank you, Doctor. You want to ask something? Just a little bit, yes. Last one,
għax kiena għed mux Malti, talek issa tela. Kiena għed mux Malti, ma tela.
Inti, il-ras li kun jimżon, ġifiri dwar għabdex, dwar il-dikjarazzjoni ta' għabdex, dwar għabdex. U ma'an lawċin li rridu il-qajmu fiskali. Però, dik id-dikjarazzjoni ma tagħmel l-ebda referenza. Il-f'każijiet għandna l-volati, imma huwa il-Gvern ta' Malta li jitlob il-Kummissjoni tistħarreġ is-sitwazzjoni għaliex fil-waqt il-trattament u l-negozjati Malta u Għawdex ġew presentati bħala pajjiż jien, mhux bħala reġjun u żewġ reġjuni. Ġifieri dan il-każ aħna isna qegħdin arrestati, niddependu mid-deċiżjoni tal-Gvern, mhux minna.
Insomma, f'dinja ideali, il-Gvern ċentrali, il-Gvern f'Malta, okay, in an ideal world, the central government, the government in Malta, would take up Gozo's case if it is aware of it, and make the case in front of the European Union. But there are two ifs. One, if it is aware of it, it might not be aware, so awareness has to be created. And secondly, what's so wrong with Gozo vociferously making its case that it needs more help, more assistance than Malta because its economic situation is not as good as that of Malta? I don't see anything wrong with that. In fact, you can try to force the issue on the government to take up the case. Whatever the government does.
George, what I wanted to add with regards to this, just a month ago, for the first time, the European Union has put in the Fitto report, Fitto is a commissioner, for the first time, there's going to be a consultation for the development of a strategy for islands.
Yes.
It's the first time, and Gozo has had a part for that to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So we can act ourselves to put forward Gozo's strategy,
and this
sort of.
It's a priority.
And it can happen.
Representing Gozo.
Yeah?
Who is representing Gozo?
People from Gozo helped into having the strategy in place. That's what I can say. And we can, everybody is a European citizen and can be vociferous. And there are ways and means how Gozo can have its stand put directly to the European Union. Not through Malta, so it can happen, okay? It's happening in various other countries, and the islands now can have their say. Islands can have
If I remember well, it is within the European Commission priorities the part dealing with security, because it is also an aspect of security that small islands need more by way of investment for them to feel secure than larger islands. It's called because of peripherality, etc., etc. I think it featured there as well in the.
But this is the first time now that islands have been, because before it was remote areas, now it's islands, and it's the first time. And we can make hay. We should make hay while the sun shines in this case, because there are various islanders that are high up in the European Union elements. Okay, so just wanted to conclude. First of all, thanks to Dr. Borg for this exposition.